Hello all, my name is Sarah Stroup and I am an Associate Professor of Political Science at Middlebury College. I am so glad to welcome you all to a new series in this virtual career exploration program. MIDDVantage will focus on the field of international development in this series. You will get to hear from many talented members of the Middlebury community who work on different issues and in different institutions. And these folks will help us learn more about how to enter the challenging and rewarding field of international development. To kick off this series, we are very lucky to be joined by Charlie MacCormack, Middlebury class of 1963. Hello, Charlie.
Hey, Sarah, how are you?
I am better after seeing you, even across this distance. I'm glad to have an excuse to meet up.
Very kind.
Let me tell our participants a little bit about you, Charlie, and then we'll have a conversation to set the stage about the field of global development. Charlie MacCormack is former president and CEO of Save the Children USA, one of the oldest and most respected non-governmental organizations in global development. His other leadership experiences include positions as chair of the board of Interaction, an alliance of US-based development NGOs. He's a founding member of Malaria No More and is former CEO of World Learning. Charlie has a PhD in political science from Columbia University and is a long-standing member of the Council on Foreign Relations. Happily, I can also report that Charlie is deeply committed to the success of Middlebury students. Charlie was in Vermont for a few years as executive in residence, and I had the privilege of teaching 2 senior seminars on multi-stakeholder development with him. Every year on campus, we get to have Charlie in guest lectures, when he's offering career conversations, and I hear frequently from our students that Charlie serves as a mentor to them while they're on campus and after they've left. Thus, it is my great privilege to welcome him to this series and provide a place where his advice can inform your choices. Charlie, let's start off with an overview. Could you talk a little bit about the goals for the global development sector? What does it mean to tackle global poverty?
Well, there are a lot of different levels for defining the goals. You can do kind of the umbrella level. I've always been attracted to the little slogan that the MacArthur Foundation uses, which is to create a more just, equitable, and sustainable world. So that's all inclusive. Interaction with, when I was chair, had a slogan which was a better, safer world. So those are big abstract umbrellas, but they do encompass all the sub-goals. If you want to really drill down into the whole ecosystem, then I do think the Sustainable Development Goals are probably the place to go. There are a lot of them. There are a lot of sub-objectives and so on. They range from urbanization and youth employment to dealing with global warming and equal opportunity for women, et cetera, et cetera. But that is the nature of global development today. And so better than memorizing the 17 or 19 Sustainable Development Goals, it's better to realize that global development is an interdependent system of factors. So climate change impacts migration. Migration impacts youth employment. Youth employment impacts political stability, et cetera, et cetera. So I would conclude this part of the discussion with the importance of realizing that global development is multifaceted, made up of many elements, that those elements impact all 7.5 billion people on the planet regardless of nationality or ethnicity, and they all interact with one another.
Fantastic. I know that we've had many conversations digging into the complex interaction of these causes of global poverty. There's quite a diverse landscape of players at tackling global poverty, and I'm wondering if you could talk for a few minutes about those key players. Who leads in the field of global development?
Well, I would make the same broad point that I just made, which is it's very important to look at these various actors as parts of a whole system in which these sectors or actors play different roles. So you have the UN and the UN agencies and the World Bank and the IMF, which deal with the global organization and decision making of the process of addressing these goals. And then you have the governments, the nation states, the bilateral donors who write the checks and translate those global frameworks into funding. You have the universities who create the intellectual understanding of strategies and what works and what doesn't work, and helps the system adapt itself and improve itself and to see itself more realistically. You have the corporations that obviously utilize the power of markets to bring goods and services to people around the world and in developing countries. You have the international non-governmental organizations that link the community leadership and community groups and so on with national governments, with global donors, and with UN agencies. You have the foundations that examine where there are gaps in that system and try to invest in interventions that improve this system, which is often more notable for its inefficiencies than for its outcomes. But I don't think there's any way to understand the dynamics of these global organizational sectors or actors without understanding they all play a role in the larger process of global development and achieving a better, safer world.
One of the things that I hear you saying in talking about these different players is that each of them has a particular set of resources or perhaps expertise or standing that they bring to the task. And I wonder if for a minute you could reflect on the question of resources that has long been at the heart of global development. The idea of tackling global poverty historically involved ideas of transforming countries that are not our own, and many actors in the global north perhaps sending resources, but also imposing their own ideas on those other countries. So I know a lot of people who are considering a career in global development might have some questions about grand colonial projects, or maybe this idea of being a white savior. Can you talk a little bit about power dynamics in the field and perhaps how those have changed more recently?
Well, my answer flows from what I said about the actors and how they, what roles they play in global development. So I would begin by saying that power or authority or influence or resources is not our automatic thought about money and finances, not only military force and police and courts and jails, but also intellectual capacity, for example. So those actors, like universities and think tanks, that bring the capacity to look more scientifically at issues of resources and policing and so on, also have a source of power. There's organizational power, and large, talented, well-placed organizations have power that don't necessarily have to do with finances, or certainly police and courts and military. So whether it's the various virtual environmental organizations, or whether it's the Red Cross or UNICEF or Save the Children with their hundreds of thousands of staff and millions and millions and millions of community volunteers, these entities have the capacity to deliver a vaccine, let's say, to 7.5 billion people in a few months. That's not money, because a lot of that system is already out there. It's certainly not police, but it is decades of credibility and community respect and so on. And finally, I would talk about moral power and resources. So someone like Nelson Mandela or Mahatma Gandhi decades ago had a huge influence on kind of the spirit of global development and the universal framing of global development. In fact, I think Gandhi's Hindi term was satyagraha, which is truth force. So on the one hand, the idea of force is what people typically think of in power and resources, but truth as a force is not automatically what people come up with. So you as a scholar of power, like every political scientist, would be the first to understand that there are these many sources of power, and in a massive reality that we call global development, all of these sources are interacting with one another every day in every community and every country and every issue. And so I also believe that leadership is a sixth resource, which can be at the community level, the family level, the province level, the national level, the organizational level, or the global level. And I raise that because I do think that's the power or capacity that forms these different other sources of power into an actual future.
I'm really grateful for the expansive overview that you've given us of the field of development, a field that you know so well. Part of the goal of this conversation is to equip possible development professionals with the equipment to get ready for the field today. Right now, the coronavirus pandemic is dominating the attention and also the resources of Western governments. So what do you think are the likely effects on the field of global development for the next year, the next few years?
Well, fools rush in where angels fear to tread. And I think no one can say for 2023 and 2024, which will be tomorrow for the Middlebury students engaged with this video, how these various power sources will end up being active. And that will depend on what kind of leadership we get at almost every level of society. And I do think that's going to be a lifelong struggle for today's graduates. That is not going to be a sprint, but a marathon. I think healing the divisions in the world, of which the coronavirus has exposed many, will take a lifetime of dedication to communicating and engagement and modeling. So, so I think it's going to be a work in progress, and I don't believe anybody can say what 2024, let's say, and beyond will look like. Other than I am saying it'll still be a competition, a conflict, a dialogue, largely between global cooperation and national identity, which sounds abstract, but exists in the hearts and minds of every person on this planet in one form or another. So within that, we can end up with the divisions being even deeper and more angry on the one hand, and with political strife and civil war being widespread, and the have-nots of the world being even more alienated and so on from the decision makers who they will feel failed them. Or there will be a larger platform of cooperation and imagination. Because typically great crises like World War II or our Civil War do result not only in massive changes, but a decade or two of a kind of never again feeling, and a chance to relook at the accumulated barnacles of the past 2 or 3 generations. That's up for grabs, in my opinion. Which of those two? It'll be somewhere in between, and it'll also be country by country and so on, but there will be a trend from 1945 to 2005 or 2010. The trend was towards global interaction, and it brought many benefits to the world in terms of increased life expectancy and more literacy, et cetera, but it also left billions behind, stranded in isolated towns and villages and rural areas, without the benefits of tradition and without the benefits of modern opportunity. And that's a worldwide phenomenon. It's not only here in the United States. That, as I say, will be with us, but there is a fork, you might say, a fork in that road in the next couple of years. And that fork is, will we mainly look at this to go back to cooperation at every level, community level, university level, or will we remain with this trend of divisiveness and anger that's marked the last decade? Additionally, I will say that's all 2022, 2023. The next 18 months are going to be awful, traumatic. Millions and millions of people will die from disease, from malnutrition, from famine, from civil unrest. Mere anarchy will be unleashed upon the world. In a lot of countries, employment opportunities are going to disappear. Young people will really have a challenge. So it's going to be really tough. And again, leadership will either arise to see that as an opportunity to rethink the inequities and evils that are there, or people will become even more entrenched in their foxholes.
I know that we've talked about this a number of times. The intersection of humanitarian relief and global development is continuous. Our attention right now is on an emergency in largely the developed world, but that has impacts on the resources available for tackling long-standing problems that require constant attention. I know you're an optimist, Charlie, and it bothers me to hear you offer such a dire prediction for the next few months, but I trust that your well-informed and practiced perspective is accurate here. Given the dynamics of what's going on right now and what might be happening over the next few months and years, what sort of advice would you give to a person who's in their early 20s, say, looking to enter the field of development? Is there professional training or a set of experiences that can help prepare people for the development field?
I am going to address this to Middlebury students and other young people who have been fortunate enough to be educated and prepared for global leadership roles. Because I think that's a special honor and a special responsibility. So this is not necessarily what I would say to a middle school class in Nebraska or Nigeria, but what I would say to all of us who have been fortunate enough to be blessed with great opportunities. So the first thing I would say is don't panic. You will have the life of meaning you want. See this as a long game. Think about the long game before you back right down to the next month and your 2020 summer internship or whatever it may be, and realize that you have been given the tools by fate, your family, your community, your institution of higher education, your community associations, scouts, and so on and so forth, to make decisions that achieve your goals. There are as many setbacks in life as there are opportunities. So how we play the hand we're dealt makes all the difference. And you mentioned being an optimist, and Churchill once said, basically, look, we have a choice to be a pessimist or an optimist. And it's just much more pleasant to be an optimist. And even though I painted a bleak picture 2021. It's also an incredible opportunity because it can be a wake-up call for almost everyone. As horrible as this is, and as dismal as my forecast, it's 1,000% better than if this had been an influenza virus, which is much more deadly, more virulent, and impacts people mainly between 20 and 50. That would have wiped out the world working force, the people who have to make all the rest of society, young and old, move along. So this can be a wake-up call about that. It's also a huge message that viruses know no borders, and temperatures know no borders. And again, as horrible as this is, climate change is even more negative because it can never be turned around once locked in. So again, it can be a wake-up call that what we see in front of our noses and focus on, which is natural in human nature, is not what will have the biggest impact on our lives. So I ask everyone looking at this video to think about how to use this coming 18 months as an opportunity for yourself and others to change their priorities a little bit. And that's the second thing, which is attached to that, which is taking a longer view. Don't just think about your summer internship and so on. Not that you don't think about it. I'm not saying don't think about it, but saying don't just think about it. And the more you think of where things are going to be 4 or 5 years from now and work back, then the better your decisions in the next 6 months are going to be. And to be very specific, in 5 years, most everyone listening to this should have a master's degree in the area of their interest. And they should have spent a year or two working inside of an organization, ideally in a different culture. So if you start there, and then you say, all right, in the next month and in the next 3 months and the next 6 months, of the threats and opportunities that I have out there, what will get me to that place in 2025, that's, in my opinion, a more helpful way to look at it rather than just saying, what the hell am I going to do with myself in July and August? The third thing I would say is within the ecosystem framing I have consistently used, I still say pick an issue that you're really going to focus on, because focus is what achieves goals. Yes, understand that literacy or immunization or climate mitigation are part of much larger issues. But realize that you can't be jack of all trades and master of none and get anything accomplished. And given the educational opportunities you've had, getting things done, I believe, is an obligation to those who much is given, much is expected. Fourth, I would say, whether you want to call it lifelong learning or staying awake, thinking, reading, listening to people different, really listening, working every day to say what's happening in the world and what's going to be happening down the line, and why do people different than I am think the way they think. To keep doing that and adapting is going to be the name of the game. It's always been the name of the game, and it's even more essential now. The pace of change has increased in velocity, literally exponentially, and also less predictably. So if those of you listening feel like the last 6 weeks have been disruptive, wait till you see the rest of your life. So you've got to learn to live with this kind of upsetting change, as we all do. It's hard, and I think why we have some of the cleavages politically we have is that some people have been blessed with the opportunity to understand more about rolling with change, and some people haven't. And so the desire to retreat into ethnic and religious and linguistic security blankets is really understandable if you're completely lacking the tools to deal with the disruption that's come into your life. And then more short term, meaning in the next 3, 4, 18 months, I would say stay engaged. You know, don't sit at home and say, well, I'm not going to go to school when it's got to be online, or whatever your default position may be. Go to graduate school if you're a senior and you can't find a actual job opportunity in the coming year. Volunteer in an area that is close to you and is aligned with whatever your long-term interests are. Reach out to all your networks, your family networks, if you haven't been in touch with the career counseling people at Middlebury, be in touch with them and ask them what alumni are in your area or in your field. I'm happy to talk or email with anyone listening to this. Charlie MacCormack, charlie.mccormack@gmail.com. But take advantage of all of that. So I think it's almost easier to say what are the processes we utilize in the next 18 months than what specific kind of internship or employment or other strategy. Think outside the box, because the box is gone.
I appreciate, Charlie, that you're encouraging all of us to take the long view. It helps at this moment of remote learning and remote conversations. I very much hope that the next conversation, or at least one of the next conversations that we get to have, is in person. For now, thank you so much for joining us, and thanks to all of you for joining in the MIDDVantage series on international development. We are grateful to Tracy Himmel-Isham, Faria Hawk, and Jeff Sawyer for including us both in this series. Stay well, and we hope to see you soon.
Thank you, Sarah.